In the previous video, we looked at price regulation in economics. These are price ceilings and price floors set by the government. However, the government can also regulate the quantity supplied. It has three means to do so: subsidies, taxes, and quotas. Means which are also called quantity regulations. Today we are going to cover all three quantity regulations, making use of a tomato to explain. Of course, any other product or service can be used instead of this one. Let's look at subsidies first. A subsidy is some kind of payment to either the buyer or seller of a good in the market. If there is a subsidy, the supplier of a good or service receives a higher price than the buyer of the good or the service has to pay. This concept can be understood easiest by an example. Let's have a look at the market for tomatoes. We see the market for tomatoes on your screen. This graph might look confusing at first, but don't worry, we will cover it completely with patience so you will definitely understand. As you probably already know, in the initial situation, so the situation before the subsidy was implemented, the price of a tomato is P and the quantity sold is Q. This is the equilibrium between the demand D and the supply S. Now there's a subsidy implemented. This shifts the supply curve to the right by the price of the subsidy. So, if the subsidy is $1, the supply curve shifts outward by $1. If the subsidy is $100, the supply curve shifts outwards by $100. I think you get the concept. This is the same movement of the supply curve as in a scenario where supply increases. The new equilibrium is the point where the new supply curve intersects the demand curve. This is at P buyer and Q prime. P buyer is the price that the consumers pay for the tomatoes after the subsidy was implemented. This is different from the price the producers receive for the product because of the subsidy. The price the producers receive after the subsidy is P seller. But what is the impact on the market of this subsidy? The consumer surplus in the initial situation was A plus B plus E. The consumer surplus after the subsidy is A plus B plus E plus C plus F plus H. The producer surplus in the initial situation was C plus F plus D. The producer surplus after the subsidy is C plus F plus D plus B plus E plus G. The cost of the subsidy to the government is B plus E plus G plus I plus C plus F plus H and plus J, or the rectangle you can see between P buyer, P seller and Q prime. You can calculate the total cost of this subsidy to the government as P seller minus P buyer times Q prime. Areas I and J are deadweight loss as a result of the subsidy. This deadweight loss is derived from people that would not have bought tomatoes before the subsidy and value tomatoes lower than the price of the subsidy to the government. You can pause the video here if you need more time to look at the graph. The next quantity regulation the government can implement are taxes. Taxes are compulsory contributions to the government. If there is a tax, consumers have to pay a higher price than the producers receive. This concept in economics can best be explained by having a look at the market for tomatoes on your screen. Again, this graph might look confusing to you at first, but don't worry, we will cover it completely with patience so you will definitely understand. In the situation before the taxes were implemented, the price of a tomato is P and the quantity sold is Q. Now the taxes are implemented. This shifts the supply curve to the left by the price of the taxes. So, by $1 if the taxes are $1 and by $100 if the tax is $100. This is the same movement of the supply curve as when the supply decreases. The new equilibrium is the point where the new supply curve intersects the demand curve. This is at P buyer and Q prime. P buyer is the price that the consumers pay for the tomatoes after the taxes were implemented. This is different from the price the consumers receive for the product because of the taxes. The price the producers receive after the taxes is P seller. But what is the impact of the taxes? The consumer surplus in the initial situation was A plus B plus E. The consumer surplus after the taxes is A. The producer surplus in the initial situation was C plus F plus D. The producer surplus after the taxes is C. The tax revenue of the government are areas B and C. This area can be calculated as P buyer minus P seller times Q prime. Areas E and F are the deadweight loss as a result of the taxes. This deadweight loss is derived from the people that would have bought tomatoes before the taxes but no longer do so due to the increase in price the consumers have to pay. The last quantity regulation we look at today are quotas. A quota is the maximum quantity of a good or service that can be traded in the market. If there is a quota, the price increases significantly and the quantity sold decreases significantly. Let's have a look at this concept graphically in the market for tomatoes. In the situation before the quota was implemented, the price of a tomato is P and the quantity sold is Q. Now the quota is implemented. You can see that the new supply curve S prime follows the same trajectory as the old one up to the quantity restriction set by the quota. At this point the supply curve becomes inelastic, meaning that an increase in price does not change the quantity supplied. The new equilibrium is the point where the new supply curve intersects the demand curve. This is at P quota and Q quota. But what is the impact of the quota? The consumer surplus in the initial situation was A plus B plus E. The consumer surplus after the quota is only A. The producer surplus in the initial situation was C plus F plus D. The producer surplus after the quota is B plus C plus D. Areas E and F are the deadweight loss as a result of the quota. This deadweight loss is derived from the people that would have bought tomatoes before the quota, but no longer do so due to the increase in price the consumers have to pay. That brings us to the end of the video. This video took me a lot of time to make, so if it is helpful, please help me out by liking this video and subscribing to my channel. It is massively appreciated. See you in my next video.